Hi everyone, and welcome to another Future Design Forum 10-minute fireside Q&A session hosted by myself, Andy Smith of TDA, the Design, Product and Tech Talent Agency. I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Bryan Hamilton, who is currently the Managing Director and Global Design Practice Lead at BNY Mellon in New York. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Andy. It's great to be here.
Lovely to have you. Bryan, let's kick off. Would you mind just giving the audience a little brief lowdown in your kind of career today? I know you had that brilliant agency background before going client side.
Yeah, happy to. I actually started right out of school in the late 90s, joining an internet incubator, which at the time was trying to sort of incubate new ideas around business on the sort of newly forming World Wide Web as it was then. And that's where I kind of got a taste for everything digital. I had a design background, a design education, and sort of went from there to learn much more about UX and technology and merging all of those together. I then worked at a couple software companies, but ended up finding myself in New York. I worked at RGA for about a year and then ended up at Razorfish for the majority of my career. So about 11 years I spent there doing really kind of experience design across, a lot of entertainment, banking, insurance, automotive, which I think was the great part about working at an agency, just being able to touch all those different industries, learn a lot more about businesses behind it, work with a lot of creative folks, which I love to do. And that was great. But sort of getting closer to the end of my time there, I kind of realized all my great designers were going in-house. It was at that sort of time. And so I thought it would be, a missed opportunity for myself to not do the same. And, as my boss often reminds me, your feet are a lot closer to the fire when you're in-house. And experience that, in all of its good and bad. So I joined PIMCO to lead their design of their sort of digital group, where I stayed for about 3 years. And then about 2.5 years ago, I left and joined BNY.
Brilliant. Fantastic career to date for sure. Thank you for that. And, as you say, you've got your feet close to the ground now in-house, and particularly in a big corporation that's going through a constant digital transformation. A question that I enjoy talking about, and I get lots of different answers, are, your opinions as a design leader on centralized v decentralized design, and perhaps even having spoken to you a bit recently on other models that maybe can use a bit of both. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there isn't a silver bullet. So it's always a good conversation to have because I think it depends on, the situation you're in, the size of the firm that you're working in, and what their business model is like. I think for where I am now at BNY, a large, somewhat decentralized organization that is now becoming more centralized.
Okay.
Or maybe I shouldn't say centralized, but I should say federated, where the bank is going through a continuous transformation to pull together shared services to be able to deliver scale to all the businesses, but allow each business to run, as its own P&L so that it can still sort of survive on its own merits, but there's a lot of economies of scale with sharing certain infrastructure. I kind of look at the design model that I'm hoping to achieve here, very similar to that. So a kind of federated model where there is a centralized design practice. And in a sense, if you join as an associate designer, your first job out of college, you can follow, your reporting chain all the way up to the head of design. I think that's important. It says something to designers that there is a career here, that there is a lot of growth and longevity here, which often I think at a lot of large institutions is easy to get lost in a pod somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think that's really helpful to do. But in the same way, all of our businesses are different. They're all going to want to spend more or less on design. So the model that we have here is that although all the design sort of reports up into the design practice and myself, the actual workforce is paid for and their priorities on the ground are dictated by the businesses they work in. So it's a little bit more federated in the sense of what they're doing day to day is sort of depends on their business and the business leaders of that group. But we share a lot of infrastructure, design systems, testing strategies, processes, procedures, tools. All of that gets shared at the practice level back out to all those group leads. And then when they have new ideas or come up with opportunities for improvement of design overall, they can feed that back in through the practice, which then gets disseminated back out.
I
So I
like
think
that.
it's a good sort of hybrid model.
Yeah.
It's worked well here so far, knock on wood.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the great thing is the product groups are obviously very vested in those designers, particularly if it's kind of falling in their P&L. But at the same time, the designers know they've still got the guidance and the career trajectory for a slightly centralized model, and obviously design people to report into still as well.
Yeah, and I would say my time at agencies also taught me that, a really good designer can fail in a business just because it's not the right fit.
Mm.
So sometimes this also allows us to have some flexibility to find the right fit for maybe a great designer who's suitable for one business but not another. That there is an infrastructure to create
Yeah,
some mobility.
yeah, and they can go into other projects in future dates, right, and get more scope across their career. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. I like that model. We'll keep an eye on that. And the second question to you, any tips or examples of where AI can help advance design from what you've seen so far, I guess? We haven't got that magic ball quite yet, but from what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's funny. I love watching all the AI sort of Instagram reels and TikToks of people, designing an app in point zero seconds. I think there's a lot of interesting applications out there. From what I've seen as far as automated design, to me seems less helpful. Maybe if you were just getting started with a very simple portfolio app or maybe an e-commerce app. But I think in the world I live in, it's very complicated and regulated. It'd be very hard to imagine that happening sort of off the bat. But where we're using it internally right now, and I do see a lot of benefit. A lot of the implementations Figma's done around generating realistic content and things like that. So like as an assistant or co-pilot in a sense to the designer, I think there's a lot of efficiencies to be built in the way we design things. And especially if we're getting it ready for testing, particularly in the industry we're in, we test with a lot of folks that are very detail oriented. They're going to notice things in the content and get distracted by that, even though we're testing, let's say, for more usability. So this helps us to make sure that all the content feels real, looks real, smells real.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you. And look, for your career, both agency side and on the client side, any 3 tips you can give to aspiring design leaders out there?
Yeah, I think a lot of my tips around leadership come from others. I've always loved, Daniel Pink's sort of treatise on motivation. He talks about these 3 values that I try and live as a leader, and I think finding ways to give these to your designers is a great way to sort of upskill your leadership. One is really mastery. So in that sense, I feel like you need to be an expert. Like if you're going to lead other designers, that you need to be able to execute, and your craft needs to be as good as theirs and hopefully better, so that they feel like there is some level of mastery they can obtain from working for you. That's not to say that it always has to be that way, but I do feel like where I've had less inspiring design leaders in my career were when they didn't come from design, right? I was being led by someone who didn't necessarily fully understand the craft. So I think to engage in mastery, you have to be able to understand the craft well enough that you can either provide direct guidance or find the right mentors for the right folks, so they feel that excitement of getting better at their job. The second is autonomy. So I think this is the hardest for a lot of I see kind of designers who want to then become leaders, is you have to let go. You have to build some freedom into the model so that the folks that you're leading can feel like their opinions matter and they can see their voice in the work. And sometimes you may disagree with that, not necessarily because it's wrong, but because it's just a different point of view. So finding that area where you can bestow that autonomy while still feeling like you're, the guardian of good, so to speak. I think that's a fine line. It's uh, very hard first sort of level to get to, I think, as a leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the last is purpose. And I think purpose can come in probably two different ways. Purpose of the business, so helping the business try and craft a mission or vision that feels real, but also has some element of the people that you're working for and helping in it, I think helps. In the business I work in, which is a wealth business, our mission is to help advisors help more people, right? We build software for advisors.
Yeah.
Advisors are very busy. They want to help as many people as they can. That's the mission we're behind. And so I think that helps. And then I think the second order of that, if you can get to it, is what is the purpose of design within the organization in which you work?
Okay.
And I think BNY design is relatively organized design in the way that I'm trying to do it is relatively new. So there is a great purpose here of like we are, the torchbearers of user-centric strategy,
Yeah.
user research, and sort of more high-value design, I would say, across the
Okay.
org.
Thank you. And I think talking about purpose, you're starting to answer my next question, which is any kind of advice for a design leader how to elevate design within an organization.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in examples over sort of conversation. I think that a mistake a lot of really smart designers make is they try and talk their way into elevating sort of design and having people understand the value of it. I think it's a lot easier and more effective to when you are sort of within an organization and you want to prove the value of it, to find an area that you feel is most ripe to benefit from the value of design, go all in to create a really good case study within the organization. So that when you're having these conversations about why it's valuable and why it's important, you have something to point to that came from the organization that the person you're talking to is in, and say, look at what we did.
Yeah.
And I think it's a visceral thing that when people see something that is good, they want it and they want it for themselves. And that becomes a really great motivator for
I
elevating.
like that. I mean, we talk so much about, particularly from my side, which is the talent management side, we talk so much about case studies presenting an interview, right? But actually have that case study internally to present to the business that perhaps aren't in design is a really good thought. Thank you.
Yeah, it works well for us. And I think particularly in an organization like ours, where a lot of it is really educating and helping people understand design, everyone's busy. But when you see something that really works well and you hear from clients how well they love it, there's really no arguing, right?
Good, for sure. Brilliant. Thank you. And my last question, the curveball question is away from design, probably. Can you let us know something that perhaps few people know about you, Bryan?
Sure. Many years ago, when I was first finishing university, I actually ran a club night. I was a house DJ in Toronto.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
with a couple other friends, we had started a night. We ran for about 3 years, had a really great time. I think the nightlife sort of got to be too much for me as I got older, but I had a great time and I still love the music and I still DJ at home.
I love that. And you mentioned the word house music. I mean, that's a pretty British terminology, isn't it? It used to be EDM in America more than then the house came through.
Yeah. Well, and then house music sort of came from Chicago. That was the
That's
original
right. Yeah.
origin of it. And that's, I was in Toronto where I grew up, and we always would go to Detroit and Chicago.
Wow.
So I had a lot of influence from both techno and house, from those cities, which was great.
I love that. That's a super interesting insight. We'll continue that conversation off a video.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
Bryan,
great.
thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. There's been some really strong tidbits there, takeaways for design leaders, aspiring design leaders, and just design in general. So yeah, we'll be seeing you in more TDA talks and in person in a few weeks as well for one of our roundtables.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Andy.
Great, Bryan. Much appreciated. We'll see you soon.